Welcome to the Motivating Students to Better Behavior webinar. I'm Caroline Redding and I'm hosting this webinar today. Our goals for this webinar are to define motivation in terms of value and expectancy, provide you with 4 strategies to increase student motivation, think about when and how to design a class-wide motivation system to target specific behaviors, and how do you determine if your motivation system is working? So think about this. What motivates you to come to work every day? So we come to work, we must be motivated to come to work. Even if you don't like your job, even if you are doing something that's not your preferred activity, we are motivated to come to work, maybe by the students. Maybe you love what you do and you get satisfaction from it like I do. That motivates me to come to work every day. For some people, they're motivated to work because of a paycheck. So every activity you are involved in doing consistently, you're motivated to do in some way. Behavior that repeats is motivated behavior. It's motivated by what we gain from it or what we avoid by engaging in that behavior, but every repeated behavior has been motivated. Think about this question. My students lack motivation to. Go ahead and take a piece of paper if you have one handy, and I'm going to give you a few seconds to jot down some of the things that you think your students lack a motivation to do in your classroom. As we go through this webinar, I want you to keep that list in your mind. These are the things that I believe my students lack a motivation to accomplish or do in my classroom. And so as we go through this, I'm going to think about how I can apply what I'm learning here to these activities. First of all, let's talk about what is motivation. There are 2 factors that affect motivation: expectancy and value. And if either one of those is 0, we have no motivation. Value is the degree to which we value the rewards that accompany succeeding to that task, the what's in it for me. The expectancy is the degree to which I expect to be successful at the task. So for example, if I say to you, I'm going to give you $1 million to translate the Champs book into Hungarian language. And you have until Friday morning to do it. And today's Monday. You have until Friday morning to do it. But you can't use any outside aids. Well, many of us would be very motivated to get $1 million. I don't know anybody who wouldn't be. Right? I'm motivated, I really value the money. But do I expect to be able to do it? Well, unless you actually speak Hungarian and you know the language well. It's also a very big book. It's over 300 something pages long, and I just don't think I have enough time, right? What if I said to you instead, I'll pay you $1 million and all you have to do is translate page 301 and you can use any tool you'd like. And you have until Friday, and today's Monday. Most of you would suddenly say, I think I have a chance of doing that. I'm a little more motivated to at least attempt it than the first one where if you feel like, why bother even wasting my time? So I want you to think about this in the context of our students and motivation. Do they actually value what we're asking them to do? What are they going to get from it? What's in it for them? And can they reasonably expect success? So expectancy times value equals motivation. So the focus of this webinar is on increasing the value factor of the motivation, not the expectancy. There are strategies you can implement to enhance your students' motivation to follow your rules, increase responsible behavior, and achieve your classroom goals and expectations. Now, this is only on motivation for behavior that we're focusing on, but you can, in fact, also change their motivation for academics. But that's a different webinar. That's more on the academic side. We're focusing on behavior. So the first thing is we're going to look at some strategies, and the first one is always my go-to beginning because this is the one that research shows is a foundational strategy. That is to build positive relationships with your students. So when you build positive relationships with your students and provide that frequent feedback, you motivate your students to demonstrate their best behavior. And great salespeople understand that establishing a connection with their customers is essential to selling them on the product. Coaches understand that connecting to their players on a personal level builds team spirit and motivates their students even when things are going wrong. Making connections and establishing a rapport with your students, like a great coach or salesperson, is going to assist you with motivating your students and getting the best out of them that they can give you. Students work harder when they like and respect their teacher and feel that the teacher cares about them. So one way to demonstrate to students that you value them as individuals is through the use of non-contingent attention. Non-contingent attention involves giving students time and attention not because of anything they've done, but just because you notice and value them as people. So we might hear students say, ignore me, I don't care, I'm used to it. Anyways, I'm invisible. And so we have students that they just feel like nobody cares that I'm there. Non-contingent attention will help motivate them because they will realize, yes, you do care that I'm here. And it's really hard to read this little cartoon, but basically the little girl comes running in saying, attention everyone, attention. And everyone looks at her and says, well, what did you need? And she says, well, I just wanted everyone's attention. Sometimes our students will act out to seek attention by misbehaving, being loud, and interrupting. Dr. Vern Jones is an expert on student discipline and motivation, and you can think about your interactions with students like a piggy bank. And every time you interact with them positively by showing an interest in him or her as a person, you're making a deposit. So every time you have those good interactions, it makes a deposit. If you make enough of those deposits, then you have a reserve. And that reserve is helpful for when you have those times when you must make a withdrawal and have a negative interaction because the student is misbehaving. The more you invest in a student, in those positive interactions, the more the account goes up. And then when you do have to make corrections, the student is less likely to feel like you're picking on them and is more likely to understand that you're just trying to help them by correcting misbehavior. Students often believe that if the teacher corrects their behavior, the teacher doesn't like them. Even high school teachers report that students have this misconception. Providing non-contingent attention or specific praise as soon as possible after correcting the student's behavior allows you to send the message that you still care for that student and can sort of reduce or dissolve any tension that the student may feel. Word of caution: maintain your professionalism while being friendly. Don't cross the line to over-familiarity. If you blur or step over this line, you lose authority with students. It'll make it more difficult for you to motivate or correct and may cause anger in students when you attempt to discipline. Show an interest in students, talk about their lives, connect with them, but but keep it professional. Strategy 2 is about providing positive feedback or attention. Feedback should be given when they're learning a new skill or behavior, if there's a difficult skill or task that they're having to put effort into completing, when we want to increase a behavior that requires that effort, and when the student has pride in positive behavior. And your feedback should be accurate. Don't make something up. It should be specific and descriptive. Avoid generalizations like good job or way to go. Make it contingent. Feedback should be contingent on something. Make it age appropriate. So if they're in high school, don't give them feedback like you would give a kindergartner. Give it as soon as possible, so as immediately as you can, and give it in a manner that fits your style. So maybe you're kind of gruff. That's the way you're going to give your feedback. Maybe you're really super sweet. That would be the way you give it. If you're funny, give it in a way that the students know is authentic to you and it's not a put on, it's not sarcasm. They want to know that you're giving them authentic, valuable, real feedback. Research demonstrates that contingent feedback has been shown to increase academic and social behaviors as well as decrease problem behaviors. Feedback should only be given for behavior that has some importance. Otherwise, it just sounds condescending. So if you have a student who has nice handwriting, don't give them feedback that says, oh, how lovely your sentences are, you well-shaped E's, unless that's something that they're working on. If it's a high schooler who is not working on their handwriting, finding that if that's the most you can find to say about their work, that's going to sound condescending. Don't give feedback on overly simplistic behavior. It needs to be something of importance. You're going to strive for 3-to-1 positives to negatives or higher. You should have 3 times as many positive interactions as negative interactions. What you pay attention to is what you're going to get more of. So paying attention to behaviors that frustrate or annoy you can actually increase the likelihood of those behaviors reoccurring. So for example, calling out. If you answer students that call out, you actually reinforce or motivate calling out behavior. Instead, flip the script and pay attention to those exhibiting the behavior you want to see. So for example, Jennifer's sitting at her desk, she's got her book out, she's working, she's using her slant. I would come over and give her that feedback to see more of that. Johnny gets out of his seat often. When he's in his seat, I want to pay attention to him when he's in his seat. If there's a problem with calling out, I'm going to pay attention to when they're not calling out. So flip the script and pay attention to what you want to see more of. Remember, it's what the student is doing at the time that makes it positive or negative. So if you look at a student who is misbehaving and you say to them even something as nice as, hey, would you go turn off the lights for me, as a redirection, that's still considered a negative interaction because the student was not doing what you expected of him to do at that moment. If a student is doing what they're supposed to be doing, then that interaction is considered. Strategy 3 is really about intermittent celebrations. Intermittent celebrations are what we call slot machine reinforcers. I'm going to talk to you in just a little bit about slot machine versus soda machine reinforcers. So we consider intermittent celebrations as a slot machine reinforcer. Slot machines are highly addictive because we never know when the next coin is going to pay out. So it's very addictive because we're not quite sure when it's going to happen, but we think, oh, maybe next time, maybe next time, maybe next time. It's very addictive to people. So plan to reinforce student success or when they approach success And so you're planning ahead, and at the beginning, you're going to use a high rate of intermittent celebrations to keep the motivation high. Then you're going to fade it out a little bit. And when you use this intermittent celebration, you reward some, but not all, occurrences of the behavior. This keeps them guessing. An example might be the beginning of school. Students are expected to have certain supplies with them for every class. This is being prepared for class. It's considered a responsible behavior. Maybe in the very beginning, you check and you give a reward for everyone who has all the materials they're supposed to have in class, whether it's a point towards earning something, or if you have a PBIS dollar that you give out. Then the next day, maybe you do it again. But then you might do it 2 days later or 3 days later. And then you might do it again. And the students never seem to know when you're going to be checking for their having all the materials. And because they never know, they're more likely to always be prepared because they're ready for it, because they want to get in on that reward. When planning the rewards, make sure that they're meaningful to students, and consider asking for student input or using some sort of choice survey to get an idea of what's important to students. So here's our soda machine and slot machine. Responding to behavior, you need to be like a soda machine sometimes and a slot machine other times. Think about a slot machine. If I go into the slot machine and I put my dollar, I pull the handle, I don't know what I'm going to get. I might get nothing. I might get a little bit of money. I might win the jackpot. I just don't know what's going to happen. With a soda machine, I put my dollar in, I push the button. I'm not thinking, I wonder if today I'm going to get a Dr. Pepper when I push a Coke. I'm not thinking, I wonder if when I push 7-Up, a sandwich is going to come out. Or maybe this time I'll do it, I'll push the button and nothing will come out. I'd be very, very, very upset if when I push the button on my soda machine and nothing came out, right? That's why we see people leave these notes. I lost $1 in the machine, please give it back. Or if I push one brand or type and I get another, I'm confused, I'm upset. This is not what I wanted. I thought, hey, I put this in and I expect to get what I ordered out. When I go to a slot machine, I put it in, I pull the handle. I don't say, wow, I didn't win the jackpot, I'm mad. We expect that sometimes you win, sometimes you lose. So we need to take this understanding of slot machine versus soda machine, inconsistent rewards to consistent and almost boring rewards, and apply it to our students' behavior. We're going to respond to positive, responsible, appropriate behavior like a slot machine. You're going to encourage increasing those positive behaviors because they're never going to know when that responsible behavior pays off. Are they going to hit the jackpot this time? Is this the time I get it? And those intermittent celebrations are going to reinforce and really motivate positive behavior. We're going to respond to inappropriate or negative or irresponsible behavior like a soda machine. We're going to respond in the same boring way. If you do this, this is what happens. If you do this, this is what happens. And you're going to actually encourage a decrease in negative behaviors. Slot machines provide that variable response, and people continue to play even when they know that their chances of losing are high. They continue even after they get a little reward, and actually that motivates them to more. So student success keeps high motivation. Soda machines provide just consistent responses. We know the soda machine is going to give us soda. We don't expect something different. And we're kind of like a broken record. Oh, you got out of your seat. You didn't come prepared for class. It's -1 point. Today, everybody, who's got all their supplies for class, no homework pass. That's motivating, right, for some kids. Tomorrow, I'm going to be like, I'm going to make sure I have it because I can't believe I missed out on that. So intermittent celebrations, we need to increase them or decrease them depending on where our students are at. So we want to increase the frequency of intermittent celebrations. Remember, like that slot machine, it's variable. They never know when it's going to happen. When the students are in an early stage of learning a new skill or improving an existing skill, we want to up the intermittent celebrations because we want all of those baby steps to be celebrated. Look at you. You're making it. You made it from here to there. Oh, let's celebrate. You made it from here to there. All right, let's celebrate. If a student is working on a behavior that's difficult for them, we definitely want to do those more frequent intermittent celebrations. But we're going to decrease the frequency as the students increase their proficiency of the skill, and especially if they're demonstrating mastery. So we don't want to say, yay, all the people brought a pencil today if everybody's been bringing their pencils, notebooks, agendas, and all of their materials that they need every day. We're not going to celebrate having a pencil, right? So we want, as they master the skill, we're going to decrease the frequency of our intermittent celebrations and maybe focus on a different behavior or skill they need to become better at. So intermittent celebrations create a sense of celebration about what they've accomplished and provides feedback that lets students know they've achieved something special. They've achieved something. Examples could be, are shown on the screen here. Teachers get into this idea that everything has to be a tangible reward. I have to actually give them a toy or something, but it doesn't have to be. In fact, for students where there's a positive relationship with the teacher, that verbal feedback can be more powerful than a tangible item. Rich, positive feedback to students can be enough to continue motivating students, and it's more likely to be meaningful when they know that you have that care for them, that you care about them, they feel accepted by you and liked by you. Remember, relationships are really a key part. That's at the beginning of this webinar. And you'll see that there's some menus of ideas on the screen. You could do buttons, there's certificates, and I'll give you an example of how a certificate even can be very motivating. One of my first years of teaching, I had a student who worked really hard on day one of one of the FCAT tests, and I just was really impressed with her perseverance and her effort. At the end of the day, I actually gave her just a little certificate. It says, "You rock." And the next day, my class was feverishly working from the minute we started to the minute we left. Almost nobody was folding their books and saying they were done with 20 minutes left. And I couldn't believe it. And I asked one of the students later on, she says, well, I want a certificate. So I had to pull out the certificates and give them to almost the entire class. And that was a real eye-opener for me that sometimes the simplest things can be highly motivating to our students. They want to be recognized and provide feedback for when they're doing well. So who's misbehaving in your class? This is important to think about. When you think about your class and how many students are misbehaving or how many students are exhibiting a problem behavior. So remember when I asked you at the beginning to think about my students lack motivation too. Is this all your students? Is it 1 or 2 students? Is it 5 or 6 students? That number is important because If it's your entire class or just about the entire class, you're going to want to think about implementing a class-wide motivation system. If it's only one or two, we could do individual motivation systems. Everything we've talked about up until now have just been strategies for increasing motivations generally with your students. And many times these strategies will work for a majority of the students sitting in our classroom. Sometimes it's not enough, and we actually need to devise or write out a specific motivation plan. So whether or not you're thinking whole class because it's all but one or two, or if it's only one or two, the steps are the same. The reason why we put a limit on one or two is you don't want to be running around with 4, 5, or 6 individual motivation systems. That's just too much to think about. And it's less likely that you're going to maintain those systems because it's difficult. If you're in middle school or high school, or even in elementary where you are departmentalized and you have multiple classes, think about implementing a class-wide motivation system that's replicated across all classes. The targets might be different, but try to keep the same structure. So strategy 4 is developing a targeted motivation system. And there's 3 steps to this. First is identify a problem and the goals of this class-wide motivation system. Make it specific, observable behaviors. So think about, what is the problem I'm having? Maybe it's my students can't transition from center to center in a reasonable amount of time. Well, I wouldn't put reasonable amount of time as part of my goal. My goal might be something like, we're going to move from center to center transition in less than 1 minute. Maybe it could even be less than 30 seconds. But we're going to put a specific time frame, and we're going to teach the students what it looks like for them to be at the new center and working and engaged by the time that minute's up. So we're going to identify the problem and what's my goal, what's the outcome that I'm looking for. Then I'm going to determine which type of system I'm going to use, non-reward based or reward based. Then I'm going to identify how I'm going to maintain, modify, and then fade the system. Please remember that when we go into any kind of motivation system, we have to have a plan in place for how we're going to fade that system. We don't go into it saying, well, this is just the new norm. We realize that eventually we have to take that support away because students should have internalized and become more motivated to engage in those behaviors. So let's break this down. Step 1, identifying the problem and goals. We're going to narrowly define the problem you're trying to solve. What are the behavior and motivation concerns? Is it I need to increase student engagement? Is it I need to increase the percentage of papers complete? And then what misbehaviors occur fairly frequently? You're going to want to brainstorm a list. Motivation systems should only tackle one behavior at a time. Don't try to put a big mishmash in there. Or if you want to do more than one exactly targeted behavior, think about an umbrella of a couple of behaviors that are very, very closely related. Determine what your system goals are. Decide what you want to achieve by implementing the system. Remember, limit the system's focus by prioritizing. You might think, what's easiest for me to start off with? Or maybe you start off with the one that's giving you the most trouble. So for example, I might begin with disruptions, and I could do kind of a broader, or define those, calling out, name calling, out of seat. Then once I've got those under control, I might move on to increasing work completion and quality of work once all those disruptions are under control. Step 2 is, which type of motivation system do you want to use? Non-reward based systems are appropriate for students who are behaving responsibly for the most part. They complete most of their work, follow most of the rules, and demonstrate cooperation in the classroom with peers. For these students, goal setting can be an effective strategy to increase student motivation intrinsically, as well as maintain and enhance motivation in the long term. With these students, using a reward-based system is not really needed. Though if you find that you need to use a class-wide motivation system, consider reinforcing these students with personal goals. Goal setting gives students something to strive for so they don't fall into patterns of going through the motions. Reward-based systems are appropriate for classes or individuals that demonstrate frustrating levels of misbehavior and irresponsible behaviors, a lack of productivity, and a lack of cooperation with peers in the classroom. These students are not intrinsically motivated to act responsibly. A reward-based system may provide the incentive to get students moving in a more positive direction. We're looking to ignite behavioral momentum. That is, that behavior increases the likelihood of more behavior. Once students start experiencing success, they are increasingly motivated to be successful and thus work harder, experiencing more success. Remember, success leads to success. Let's be clear though. Reward systems are not bribery. Bribery is when you give somebody something for doing something illegal, immoral, and wrong. But if you use a reward-based system, please keep in mind the level of structure, and we're looking at that now. High or medium that your class needs. Choose a system that's appropriate for your structure, and you can refer to page 324 in the CHAMPS book for assistance. And this is actually a chart from the CHAMPS book, and you'll see that reward systems that are appropriate for a high structure needing class are things like whole class points on a time interval, and that could be like a 10-minute time interval or 20-minute time interval. Maybe an economic simulation, so that's kind of like our PBIS dollars, but maybe they can earn dollars in the classroom or points that then they can use to purchase items or things that they want, like sitting in the teacher's chair, writing with a special pen. I've seen that one in classrooms, or sitting with a friend. One time I even saw wearing a hat for the day in class. So there's all different ways that we can do like an economic stimulation. Reinforcement based on reducing misbehavior. So those are good ways to kind of let everybody know what's going on with the behavior. Play the good behavior game, or even behavioral grading. Medium structure here is whole class points, 100 squares, mystery motivators, lottery tickets, mystery behavior of the day, public posting. That could be even like a reward chart, and even self-evaluation can be used for like students that need medium structure. We're not really going to look at the low structure ones because nobody that I've ever been into their classrooms in the 4-county area has really had students that are just needing low structure. So for example, here's some examples. So the 100 square is down here, and basically you have almost what looks like bingo charts and little pieces of paper in a jar that have numbers on them. And when everybody is meeting the goal of the behavior challenge, you get to pull out a number, fill it in on the hundreds chart, or this we've got here is this is a 5 by 5. So maybe you do the 5 by 5. This one is an 8 by 8, and this is a 10 by 10. They fill it in, and when they make a bingo, then they get a reward. This is one that I like to use over here, this Shoot the Moon. These come directly from the CHAMPS book. And so basically you write your goal down here at the bottom, and if it is, so I have one that I saw being used in a classroom just the other day, which was using the attention signal effectively and students responding appropriately within 3 to 5 seconds. And it had listed on there what behaviors the students needed to demonstrate. And each time it occurred, they fill in one of the dots. When the dots are filled in, they get a reward. And so they can do this also with more content-specific examples, like This one is the Oregon Trail, so they have to make it so far, they get points. This one is using from a cell. So more examples can be found in the CHAMPS book on pages 324 to 353. Let's think about regular versus intermittent rewards. So this goes back to that soda machine and slot machine. Regular rewards are highly systematic, and they say, if you do this, you earn this. So I think about me and coming to work. If I come to work every day, I get a paycheck. I earn money. Variable or intermittent is variable and unpredictable. So if you come to work, you might earn a paycheck. That might be a little unmotivating for us. But if you think about students with some of their behaviors, today they might earn. So maybe it's like this. I come to work and maybe my boss brought in cookies. If I come to work on time, maybe I get there's donuts. So it becomes a little more rewarding because I never know what I'm going to earn for doing what I should be doing. And I never know if I'm going to earn it. So it becomes more motivating. Students in highly structured classrooms may need to start out on a regular, consistent reinforcement schedule to motivate them. Using the schedule of reinforcement may get students to buy in, and teaching behaviors is more specific because we're more consistent with our reinforcement of it. It encourages students to practice the skill regularly and allows them to receive a high rate of reinforcement in the form of rewards and positive feedback. But once our students are consistently successful in the regular reward system, you need to switch to an intermittent reward system. All reward systems require maintenance and modification, and the ultimate goal is to fade the reward-based system so that our students are more intrinsically motivated instead of rewarded by an actual trinket. This is step 3, plan for maintenance, modification, and fading. Reward systems need maintenance. They need adjustment. When you plan when to modify the system and plan how you're going to fade the system. So for example, if I'm using the chart for the attention signal, maybe the very first time I say, when I'm teaching it, I'm going to go back to, if I'm using the regular interval, I'm going to, every time we do it, put a mark on there. And when we get to 5 marks, we get a small reward. If once they're consistently getting that, I'm going to change how long it takes. So maybe you're not going to get the reward after every 5 marks. Now I'm going to do 8 marks. And then once they're consistently getting that regular intervals, every time they've done it, at 8, they've got a reward. Well, maybe now I'm going to switch it up to the intermittent interval. So we're not sure whether this time they're going to get a point or not. And again, I'm going to leave it at 8. Once they've earned 8 and they're consistently getting 8, maybe 3 or 4 times, I'm going to make it now you have to get 10. And I want you to think about if you were wanting to learn something difficult, such as to run a 5K. I'm not a runner. I would love to run a 5K, and I know I'd have to actually work for it. If all I ever did was run from my driveway to the street sign and back, am I ever going to get the ability or have the ability to run the 5K? I may master running from my driveway to the street sign and back, but that's not going to get me to my 5K. What I have to do is continually move how far I have to go. And that's what we're doing with students. Same reward, we're just moving how far they have to go in order to master it. That gives them a challenge. Students like to challenge themselves a little bit. But we don't change it from like, okay, everyone has to get 8 to now you have to get 24. Right? We're going to move it incrementally. This is all about modifying to make it more successful for the students and to change the goal a little bit. How often they have to do it, how many times we see it. And that also leads to fading, because eventually you can get those kids working for the same small reward, but with a lot more effort. And so that's part of our fading, to the point where they're getting it so infrequently for the same amount, for this additional work, that eventually they're just ready to, you know, give it up. It's not even really on their radar anymore. That's the times when you say, hey, don't you remember that we used to get such and such for this? So now it's become more internalized. Maintaining a motivation system does require work. And in this case, I want you to think about the one who has to be the most invested in the motivation system is you, the teacher. So as you decide which type of motivation system to use and plan its implementation, make sure that it's something you can live with and keep enthusiasm for. If you're excited about the system, you're more likely to be consistent and implement with fidelity. And secondly, your excitement will help get the kids on board and help them buy in. As you provide the rewards by celebrating their success or their steps towards success, focus on the behavior instead of the reward. Focusing on the reward can actually demotivate students and doesn't foster that intrinsic satisfaction or internal motivation, which is our ultimate goal. Using a rewards-based system should be a temporary measure that you use to get the class into a pattern of successful behavior. Your eventual goal is to gradually fade it so that it is your students' intrinsic motivation that is maintaining their responsible behavior. So think about keeping your energy and enthusiasm high, keep your focus on students' behavior, and keep using the other 3 motivational strategies that we talked about. So you're going to keep your relationship with students, right? Building that positive relationship, providing positive attention or feedback, striving for 3 to 1 or higher, using those intermittent celebrations, and then, if you need to, use that class-wide or student-specific motivation system. When students successfully meet the goal for a period of time, you're going to modify it, and that's what I talked about. Make it more challenging, more points to get the same reward, more challenging criteria. So this is actually what it might look like. So we might have, starting with 15-minute intervals, 10 points required. Then when they're successful, we're up to 20 minutes and 18 points. Then you notice here, we actually add an expectation. We added something, so treating everyone with respect. And then eventually, we're down here at 60 minutes and 35 points required. So we really changed the amount that they need in order to get the same reward. So here's about fading the motivation system. It's a gradual process. So we're going to switch. First, we're going to switch. Make sure you switch to an intermittent rewards instead of regular. So we're doing our slot machine, not our soda machine. Then we're going to add or switch to a goal setting system. So this is our second step. This is our first step. Then we're going to have a class discussion. This isn't something you just spring on them, hey, we're done. We're going to have a class discussion about abandoning the rewards-based system, or we could tackle a new issue. So instead of just completely abandoning it, maybe we say, all right, we've mastered this, now we're going to work on this. different behavior. So maybe it's calling out. We're going to work on calling out. So how do I know if it's working? Won't I just know? Well, maybe you will. Maybe you're just going to be able to see, okay, we went from nobody paying attention to the attention signal to everybody in class consistently responding to the attention signal within 3 to 5 seconds. It's working. Sometimes we're not quite that easy to see, right? It's not that easy to see. We're not quite that sure. So in that case, we need to collect data and to provide you with the feedback. And we can use data collection systems just by doing tally marks. So we could do the number of times successful versus the number of times not successful within a certain time frame. We could look at how long does it take the students to reach that reward. So if we're saying, it's taking kids 2 weeks to get to 8 points, maybe it's not as successful as we think it is. The number of times that the goal behavior occurs, so we're wanting to increase that behavior, so we want to see, is it happening more frequently? And I can actually track that over several days and see, is it increasing? I can also look at the number of times that targeted misbehavior occurs. So if my goal is to get everybody using their attention signal and responding appropriately, I'm targeting the misbehavior of not stopping what they're doing, looking at me, and getting on and responding to that attention signal. So I could track that number of times it occurs. So just as a reminder, the goals for this webinar were to define motivation in terms of value and expectancy. And that was that, does it have a meaning for me? The what's in it for me times do I have expectancy to be successful, or at least mostly successful, and that's going to equal my motivation. Then I gave you 4 strategies to increase student motivation. That include building a positive relationship, non-contingent attention, right? Positive feedback, which is that attention, and intermittent celebrations, and then using a class-wide motivation system. I talked about when and how to use one. So we're going to use a class-wide if there's a behavior that everybody's pretty much having trouble with, and we're going to use targeted student if there's just 1 or 2. We're going to make them specific behaviors that we're trying to address, and we're going to develop goals that the system is meant to foster. And then we talked about how you can determine if your motivation system is working, and you're going to make sure that you collect data that shows that it is actually working, so such things as our frequency, how long it takes for the students to meet the goal, etc. If you have any more questions about motivation systems, I'm going to recommend Chapter 8 in the CHAMPS book. That is a fabulous chapter that will really break down how to increase student motivation as well as implementing a class-wide motivation system. Almost all of the information for this webinar came directly from the Safe and Civil Schools and their work with CHAMPS and research for some of their other behavior books. If you have any other questions, please feel free to contact me at caroline.redding@stlucieschools.org. And please join us for our other webinars that we have scheduled. Check the Fiddler's Galaxy website for those specific dates, and we look forward to seeing you again.